Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast, brought to you by the Seeker's Quest. I'm Radha Priti, and I'm here with fellow seekers. So happy to be here with you guys today. I'm so excited to get back into this. We are going through the Gita. We're just reading through, discussing, and we are on chapter 2, text 14. So we're starting to get into the really juicy parts where Krishna is teaching Arjuna, is kind of giving him this spiritual instruction. We got to the point in 2.7 where Arjuna kind of exhausted himself of all of his reasons for not fighting and surrendered to Krishna in asking him for his guidance, saying, I'm bewildered and confused, please guide me. And so now Krishna's giving him this wisdom, and it's purifying all of us today here, isn't it? So yeah, let's get back into it. We were learning about the soul, and that's what we're still going to be talking about today. And we will start with a very famous verse, 2:14. This verse is nectars. This is a fun one to start on. I'll share my screen. So 2:14 says, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So this is again Krishna talking to Arjuna and really the whole battlefield and all of us. And here he's talking, we've talked about we have a body and we have a soul. And the sensations of pleasure and pain that we experience are external to who we are, and they're temporary. So we talked about in the last class, Krishna's perspective is that our identity is the soul, and that the body is secondary. It's like the vehicle for the soul. The soul lives in the body, and the body is a vehicle. And that's the way to look at things. That's the correct knowledge and placement. So that means that the sensations of pleasure and pain are on the bodily platform, and they're external to who we are. Who we are is the soul, and they're temporary. And so in our experience, in our human experience, we'll have emotion, but we'll learn to tolerate that emotion, seeing it in a broader perspective. So it's like right now I'm pregnant and I'm going through it, and I'm pretty uncomfortable a lot of times. But every mom that I've talked to says that once they have that baby, they totally forget how miserable the experience was. So I'm waiting for that. But because they have that perspective, they have that broader perspective, they understand the discomfort and the purpose of the discomfort, and they don't get too entangled in it because they know that it's temporary and that it's serving a higher purpose. And that's kind of like what we need to develop. It's like, it's so easy sometimes in that moment to get overtaken by what we're experiencing on this bodily platform, whether that be the discomforts of the body, the discomforts of our mind. Maybe we're really emotional or hurt. And sometimes we have a tendency in our conditioned state to really lean into that emotion to where it kind of starts to perpetuate our future emotions and our future states, right? It's like we're driving on the road and we start to get a little bit of pull, and we'll like pull all the way off the road and roll down the hill. But the Gita teaches us to tolerate that and kind of stay focused on our destination, and knowing and accept that as we're driving to that destination, we're going to experience these discomforts along the way, because that's just part of having this human body, right? That's just part of the vehicle, is that it's going to get run down, and emotionally, physically, mentally, it's going to get run down. And we want to do our best to take care of the vehicle so that we can minimize those things. But at the same time, we know that we're going to have to accept a certain amount of them, a certain amount of the tolls that are caused by these external influences. And that's just part of our human experience that we're all binded in together here. But that is something that we can do amidst this unmanageable distress, is reduce our working frame to manageable units of times, right? Understanding that life has seasons. That's what this verse says, is it will pass like the summer and winter seasons. Life has seasons and everything will pass. Everything is temporary. So if you're experiencing something good right now, be prepared, because it's going to get bad. But if you're experiencing something bad, it's good news. It's going to get better, because that's just life. And it's kind of like when we're doing interval training at the gym, and we're like, okay, 60 seconds left, 60 seconds left. I got this. I got this. Right. Or anybody ever get an astrology reading, like because you're really in a bad spot? I don't know. You don't have to believe in astrology to like the Gita doesn't really, that's not really part of it. But it is like an art in India culture. And I've dabbled in it a bit in understanding my astrology, and I've been pretty impressed, to be honest. But I remember I was going through a pretty difficult time in my life, and I met with an astrologer, and he kind of confirmed that, oh, this is a difficult part of your life. It'll be over June 2021, and I was like, okay, just make it to June 2021. Just tolerate, just don't make any big changes or any big decisions about life. Like, because I knew that I was in kind of that state where it was any decision that I made, I couldn't trust was really going to be based off of a higher calling, because I could feel that I was just experiencing a lot. So I was just trying to kind of like stay in my lane and not make too many turns that were going to bring me too off course. And so whether the astrology is true or not, it helped me do that. It got me into that, like, okay, just wait till this time. And so sometimes that's just what we have to do. Sometimes it's just like, okay, let's just get through it without making this worse for ourselves. And in that, we have to kind of get in touch with where we are and where we're not, right? Like sometimes if we're really emotional, we know it's not the time to make a big decision, or it's not even the time to engage in a conversation, because we could just make it worse for ourselves and other people. So we kind of have to learn to take our temperature on a daily basis, on maybe a moment by moment basis, on a monthly basis. Like, where are we and what is our capacity, depending on how much distress that we've been experiencing in that moment, in that time, and show up accordingly. So that's difficult, but the Gita reminds us that everything is temporary, even the darkest times, and that we're indestructible souls, and we've weathered many storms in the past, and we'll weather this storm too, if we tolerate. And helping us weather these storms is the Supreme Being, who stands by us during our travels and shelters us during the tough times. And guided by him, we can be spiritually conscious and materially resourceful. So that's kind of the goal, and that would be like a big W, is we're not going to get rid of distress. We're not going to get rid of these tough times, but we learn to tolerate them with a broader perspective, knowing really the purpose of our life and where we're going, that final destination. And in that, we can see those distresses as just really opportunities to evolve. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. So knowing that we have an unchanging core helps us see change in proper perspective, so we don't get worked up by it. We talked about those reversible emotions that cause irreversible decisions. So when we talk about tolerance, it's kind of like a barrier in between that. We have these reversible emotions that can cause irreversible decisions, but if we learn to tolerate, it's kind of like a barrier. And what tolerating is not, it's not just passivity. It's not just like white knuckling it, right? It's deeper than that. It's maturity. It's maturity to keep the small things small and keep the big things big. So it's not something that we just kind of, do you guys know that phrase, white knuckling? I think it's like a 12-step phrase where we just kind of grin and bear it. And, sometimes we might have to do that. Sometimes we might have to do that. But what we really want to work towards to make it easier on ourselves is this broader perspective, where we can develop that maturity in our spiritual lives, and we understand that these things are normal, and we understand that they're not actually that big of a deal in the context of who we are and where we're going, because we're really in touch with our real identity, and we're really in touch with our eternal destination. And we know that these things are just little obstacles on the way. So just like being pregnant, knowing that nausea is actually not, it's like small compared to the prize at the end. So that's what we're working on here in spiritual life, and that will make it so much easier and so much more sustainable than just trying to like white knuckle it. Because that's the other thing, this tolerance, it's not something that is just an external thing. I mean, it's good. It might start externally. We might start by saying, okay, hold your tongue, hold your tongue, hold your tongue. But eventually it'll be more of an internal thing. And that's really our goal, is that even though there's lots of waves going on the outside, happiness, distress, on the inside, we're more steady. And that's what these practices will help us develop. And we'll see it in our minds and our bodies. Over time, we'll experience it, this transformation that will occur as we start to immerse ourselves more in spiritual practices and spiritual wisdom, is that these practices, they will get easier. It may start out that way. It may start off with just more of an external practice. Okay, I held my tongue that time. That was great. Good for me. But eventually it'll become natural, because you'll be more in line and you'll develop that external maturity. Trevor, do you want to say something?
Yeah, all of that was awesome. That was very elaborate and relatable. I just was gonna say that, like, Arjuna was so fixed on happiness, happiness, happiness. That's where Krishna kind of showed him what he was depending on. He was depending on in a bodily emotion and whatnot. And he's like, happiness is going to happen regardless. Distress is going to happen. It's about what you're identifying with that's the problem. And it's when it comes to the emotions, and it's easier said than done, of course. Like you said, it gets easier through practice. And the more you engulf yourself into these methods of meditation, chanting especially, you get you enter this transcendental platform, and the more fixed you get on that platform, the easier it is to become the observer, where you're not identifying with anything outside of who you actually are by nature. So whenever we're in complete anxiety and stuff like that, and you're going through crazy experiences, you might not be able to notice it right away, but it's because we're identifying with these emotions. So a little trick with affirmations, I like to say, like, I'm feeling symptoms of this emotion. I'm feeling symptoms of anger, or whatever the case may be, depression. But if you say I am angry, that's like embodying that emotion. So it gives you space between you as the observer and the emotion that's happening through your field of observation.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
love that. Yeah, those affirmations, and that kind of change in the subtle language really does make a difference between I am angry, I am to, or I am experiencing, or I feel, or I have symptoms, because we are not those things and they will pass. But if we identify with them, we're more likely to run off the road, and that could be dangerous for us. So thank you. Oh, Damodar Priya says, I found the best way to see how far you are with this practice is how you deal with road rage. Yeah. Yeah, right. That's a good one. That's a really Nicole, do you want to speak?
Hare Krishna. Good morning. Yeah, I just wanted to mention this verse. I didn't have this realization until this morning, but I feel like this verse it's like Krishna giving me permission to have a human experience. Like he's saying, there's gonna be distress and there's gonna be happiness. And like I grew up in an atmosphere where it was like you should be happy. Everyone should be happy all the time. Like, oh, you're sad. What can I do to make you happy? And so it's like Krishna telling me, you know, like you're not going to be happy all the time, and that's okay. And just so long as you, like, I'm giving you this information that like you're going to feel things that aren't amazing, but just, you know, you aren't those things. And it gives that separation of like, I can be sad, I can be angry. Um, but I'm greater than those things, but it's doesn't mean that it's not okay to feel those things. Like I'm it's going to happen. Yeah, I just feel like he's giving me permission to like have my proper human experience.
I love that. That's amazing. And yes, I kind of imbibed that same narrative growing up really till like my 20s. And I remember my therapist tell me to watch this kids movie. I forget what the kids movie was called. If people have kids, they probably know, but it has like all the little emojis and they have all the different emotions. Because I was so out of touch with my emotions. I was numbing so much that I didn't even know where I was or how I got there. And the emotions, these things, these feelings, they can really be great triggers for us for evolution. But if we're constantly suppressing them and not experiencing them or numbing out, we're missing out. So yeah, it's not only like permission, it's like these can actually be a positive thing if we learn to use them that way. If we can learn, we feel them, we experience them, and we use them to go deeper, all the while still staying in our lane, still staying in our road. But they can really be insights for us. Oh, thank you for sharing. Mariah.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Yeah, I totally resonate with what both of you are saying. Just not even allowing yourself to experience emotions and like numbing or stuffing. And now I'm coming back into Krishna consciousness again, and I'm realizing how important it is to feel these emotions, not only to let them pass, but once we receive our spiritual body and we're in the spiritual world, it's all about having these spiritual emotions with Krishna. And we kind of have to heal our relationships here on this material plane so that eventually we can experience those spiritual emotions. It's not like this is a null and void, impersonal path. It's a path of deep emotion. And that's something I'm even learning to experience. And it fuels me and inspires me to heal my emotional body, even in this material life. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, the way we show up in life is the way we're showing up for Krishna. So that is what this is. This time in this material world, this opportunity to heal our wounds and to go through it and to try to evolve. Thank you. Lisa.
Good morning. We're all revolving around this idea. And a couple of weeks ago, we were speaking about sovereignty. And I can hear when Krishna was saying, hey, Arjuna, you're a learned man, like walk on the water. It's like you see these thoughts and have command over them because you actually are able to, through your sovereignty, to recognize the world of experience and then walk on the water. And you're bringing in the parallel of the water as a symbol of our emotional body, and for us to master our emotions as we walk through our life and not to be tossed about by them. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about the If poem by Rudyard Kipling, who says, if you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, then you are really walking at the level of mastery, as someone was just saying, and feeling your spiritual awareness more than the pull of senses in the world. So that's
Wow. Yeah. Oh, that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that. And I think where we've got together here is that there's like a two-part process to that. One is knowing that these distresses and happiness is a part of life, and they'll come and go, and learning to tolerate them. But in that, it's accepting their presence, really inquiring when they're here, what they are and why they're here, digging deeper into them, almost even like welcoming them, and trying to make the shifts in the internal consciousness and your external environment necessary to kind of minimize them, whilst at the same time engaging yourself in spiritual practices so that we can develop that broader mind, and that when they come, they don't impact us so much, and they're not so intense, or they don't pull us off of our path, or even threaten to pull us off of our path, either internally or externally. So yeah, thank you all. That was great. So the other thing that I want to point out here is that Arjuna's perspective of the soul, where he is right now, is that I am the body and I have a soul. Krishna's perspective, where he's coming from, is I am the soul and I have a body. And that's the basis of his teachings. And that's what we'll see. Because if we can kind of, right now, I mean, all of us naturally, we identify with the body probably much more than we identify with the soul, most of us. But if we could really tweak that thinking, even just for this hour in class, that we're actually the soul and we have a body, it's everything Krishna's saying. It's almost like, oh, that's common sense. That makes, if that's our perspective, if that's like our starting source, then everything here, it kind of makes sense. But if you flip it, it's easy to see the other way too. So it's these worldviews are really important. So Arjuna's focus goes from doubting the existence of the soul to examining the importance of the soul. So we'll move on to the next one. Let's see, I'll share 2:15. 2:15 says, "O best among men, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress, and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation." Again, the soul is unchanging. The body, the vehicle, is temporary and changing. The embodied state is a mortal state, but tolerating the bodily duality is a state of immortality. And again, the outer state will be full of ups and downs as we are exposed to the duality, but the inner state will be steady. That's, again, like our end goal. The price is tolerance while acting responsibly. That's the price that we pay. But the prize is liberation. And that's what Krishna is saying here, is if we can tolerate what's happening to our outside body, we will get to that destination. We will get there undoubtedly. But that is a huge vulnerability on this path, is that we get too carried away, either way, by the happiness. We haven't really talked about happiness, but happiness can lead us chasing things, can kind of get us out of the lane too. You know, if we feel like, you know, we've all experienced, we're in a new relationship and we're so excited, and we start to even like drop the things that were maybe super important to us because we're so happy in that relationship. And over time, usually what happens is you kind of start picking those things back up, but we have to know, you know, that this is just part of the material experience, and we have to stay focused and in that lane towards our destination. And this is also what ultimately will bring us the most steadiness and peacefulness in our lives, if we can kind of imbibe these principles. So again, it's keeping the small things small, keeping the big things big. I remember somebody gave me this advice on my wedding day, and they had got this advice from Radha Swami on their wedding day, and they shared it with me. And so this kind of principle, these principles will help just in our regular lives, like in our relationships, in our work lives, whatever we're doing, if we can learn to keep the small things small and the big things big. So it's like if we're driving on a crowded lane and we notice someone driving wildly in an adjacent lane, if we get angry at their terrible driving and yell at them, we may run into danger in our lane. So we really have to kind of create a frame of reference of what's important in our lives and what keeps it going, and kind of let the other things go a little bit to some extent without getting too bogged down in them. It's like our mind, another analogy here is it's like our mind is a computer screen, and we constantly are getting all these like pop-ups that come, and we don't have a way to dismiss them. So we have to learn to neglect them. And to neglect the small things, we have to focus on the big things. So the more we dwell on anything, big or small, the more it dwells in our consciousness. We all know that, right? Making everything else small. We can even do this like with, like if you're getting ready to present and you're really nervous, that nervousness takes over your consciousness, and sometimes you forget what you're about to say. Right? So whatever's in our consciousness, it kind of takes over, and then it just kind of spreads, and everything else kind of goes into the background. But if we can really focus on keeping the big things big, the small things will stay small. But we need that North Star. We need that focus point. And the Gita expands our vision of what these big things really are. The big things, we're souls on a multi-life journey of spiritual evolution, multi-life journey of spiritual evolution. And during this evolution, we faced many material ups and downs, which are on the temporary platform. But if we can focus in all situations on how we can evolve spiritually, and thus keep that the big thing in our consciousness, we can progress calmly through all forms of material disturbance towards eternal transcendence. So like, even if we get into an argument with somebody, or we have a big fallout with somebody, instead of focusing on, what they did to us, how they're so bad, what their problems are, if we can focus on our role in it and how we can use that experience to evolve. If we can make sure, I've had fallouts with people and I'm like, I am never going to let that happen again. That was so terrible. If we can really use those experiences as opportunities to upgrade ourselves, to show up differently the next time, to evolve, we can keep the big things big without getting too entangled in the small things, because we could get so lost in, he did this, she said this, I'm so upset about this, now I'm hurt, now I'm just going to sit in my hurt. These things that just don't serve us or don't serve our mission, which is upgrading our consciousness, evolving our soul in this life and for the next one. So that's a little bit about how we maybe do that practically. So this tolerance empowers us when we focus on our purposefulness and not on our powerlessness. So sometimes we think that tolerance makes us powerless, right? Like if things are going wrong and we just tolerate them without doing anything, I'm like passively giving into the situation. But that's not really true. When we tolerate a situation, our purpose is not to give into that situation, but to take on some other situations, right? So if we're just kind of letting it pass and deciding what we want to get our consciousness into purposely choosing what we want to invest our mind and our energy and our resources into, and letting the other things just kind of float down the river, we actually become more empowered. So it's not like a weakness, like, oh, I'm backing down from that fight. It's no, you're just saving room in your consciousness to take on other fights that are actually going to be more conducive to your growth and spiritual evolution. And somebody who's really skilled can do this well, has that perspective that they can just see the different things floating down the river, and they can decide what they want to engage in and what they want to just let pass. That's what we're doing here. That's what we're training up for. Right. And we can use that incident to make us even more focused on the big things. And this can enhance what we're even focused on. So it can like almost make us more focused. Like yesterday I was preparing for this class, and there was like so much noise going on around me. And I think actually the noise like allowed me to focus more on what I was doing because I had to give it that like extra oomph, right? So we could do that too in these challenging things that are going on around us. Know that, okay, this is challenging environment. This is going on around me. I have to stay extra focused, extra diligent on who I want to be and how I want to show up so that I'm not swerving off the road. Right? They say that when I used to work in corporate, they used to say that like most accidents that happened were like everyday things, you know, like the really dangerous things, accidents didn't happen because when it's really dangerous, like you're really focused on what you're doing. But the everyday tasks that you're so used to, you're not so focused. You're kind of, your mind's like elsewhere, and that's where you're more prone to get hurt or whatnot. So we can use things like that too, you know, when we experience that. So it's not just an external act, but it's internal steadiness. That's so important too. It's not something we can fake. And if we try to be, you know, the enlightened sage before we really are, we're just going to end right back up in the place that we started. So better that we're just real about where we are and where we're not. And we do what we can to minimize the pains and distresses, and we keep moving forward. Corey, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to say really quickly that when we talk about tolerance, to me, that means like, okay, there might be in the initial situation where you have to do some suppression, but to me, tolerance is being able to sit with that emotion and move through it, because moving through it and processing it is actually what's going to like, you're going to get that learning, and then your body's going to be like, okay, we got the learning. I can like let that go. Because if you try, like you're saying, you know, if you try and be that sage too early and say like, okay, I'm totally fine with this when you're not, then it's going to be suppression. And that's not really the tolerance that we're looking for. We're looking for the tolerance of taking that constructive move forward and like, let me process this, let me get through it, and let me tolerate it and not run away from myself, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And we may have to be okay with sometimes letting those things come in and spending some time really dissecting them and figuring out what they are and why they are so impactful to us to get through them. And sometimes that may be necessary, right? Like if we have like childhood trauma, which we all probably have to some degree, and you know, we notice that things are affecting us, are affecting our relationships in a way that we're not satisfied with anymore. Sometimes we have to, you know, really allow them into our lives to kind of figure it out. Maybe see a therapist, spend a lot of time talking about it, dig into them deeper so that then we can let them flow back down the river peacefully. And we're not just white knuckling it, trying not to grab them. Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
making
That
that
was profound.
right action, that skillful action that's going to potentially change the situation in a constructive way. Like sometimes there's nothing we can do, and sometimes there is some creative, constructive thing that we need to think of that's not immediate with that first initial emotional reaction. But after processing it, a lot of times we can come up with some creative solution that's gonna be way better than anything we could have come up with, like when we're in that like emotional state.
Yeah, totally. We could be materially resourceful to try to minimize some of these distresses. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So in order to achieve anything, we have to choose our battles by tolerating some, focusing on fixing some things while living with other things. That's just like the balancing act. And here the Gita reveals a higher identity. In 2:13, the Gita reveals a higher identity. Then in 2:14, it instructs us to be tolerant. Now in 2:15, it tells us the reward for being tolerant, which is the spiritual realization. Because as long as we are distracted by the small waves, we're missing the big ones. And that's just, yeah. What does Leonie say? Real growth is also being okay with not being okay. Yeah. That, or sometimes being okay with like a relationship not being okay. Right? Like, okay, this is where we are in this relationship. This is unfortunate. This is probably not where I'd want to be, but I'm just going to have to leave it. You know, this, I've done as much as I can here, and this is what it is. So Lisa says, it sounds like a beautiful meditation practice to watch with detachment, and suddenly life becomes clear. Yeah, detachment really helps with these things. When we find ourselves so attached or so like wanting to be the controller, it's almost impossible to really have that sage-like perspective, to really see things as they are, because we're so entrapped in this illusion that we're the doer, and we can't see past our grip on something. Thank you. Okay, so 216. Says, those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. And I'll also say, if you're not totally bought into this yet, if you're not totally bought into like, I am the soul and I am not the body, that's okay. But if you try on some of these practices, you still may experience some transformation in your life. And that was my experience when I came into this. It was like a little bit much for me, but I tried some of it on, and then I started to see like, wow, this actually really improves relationships. My work life is so much easier now. Like it was just like that missing piece. If you could just try some of these practices on, because they really do work. So here, the seekers of the truth are the wise and the informed. They say this, and in this verse it says, the seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. So basically they're saying things that the seers of the truth, they see two realities. They see one reality in two categories. That which is temporary won't exist in the future, and that which is eternal, that won't cease to exist, so it will always exist. These are the two categories that you can divide reality up into. And things that are eternal matter the most, and things that are temporary don't matter as much. That's what they're saying here. And we do this in our normal lives, right? Like we prioritize things that have lasting effects, like a relationship, right? If we don't think a relationship is really going to go anywhere, we won't invest as much in it, right? Or if we're renting a house, we're going to take probably not as great care of it as if we own that house. So things that are longer term, we invest more in. We have that mindset anyway. So this is just taking it one step further and saying, okay, if you really buy into this, if you really can believe that the soul is eternal and that your experience here is temporary, then why not invest more in the soul while we're here? Right? Why not make decisions more for our consciousness and for our evolution than we are for, our body? Why not spend more time on spiritual practices than we do at the nail salon? Not that the nail salon is bad, but if we spend more time taking care of this vehicle than we do the actual driver of the vehicle, the soul, then we're kind of missing the point. And so that's something we can all kind of ask ourselves is how much time do we spend taking care of this vehicle versus taking care of the driver of the vehicle? Because both are important, but it's most important to have the proper perspective of what we're doing. What is the purpose of the vehicle, and what purpose does it serve in reference to the driver of the vehicle? And how do we take care of the driver, right? How do we take care of our consciousness? It may be different for all of us, but it's everything from our sadhana, from our time that we engage in we really try to connect with that source, with the higher being, whatever our sadhana is, meditation, chanting, reading, sangha, people that like spending time with like-minded individuals, right? Talking about these things. maybe doing these practices with them. And then also really kind of like what we've been talking about, getting more curious about what's going on in our mind and in our conditioning, and doing what we can to kind of try to rewire it so that we can become more open and loving and accepting and healing some of those past experiences that we've had. So all of these things can help our consciousness upgrade. So in this verse, God is the whole and we are part of the whole. God is the energetic and we are the energy. This is like the rightful viewpoint. This is reality. This is how it's placed when we talk about matter and spirit. We are part of God, but we're part and parcel of God. God is the whole. And this is an easy concept for us to say, yeah, of course, I'm not God. But in reality, when we look at our lives, we look at the way that we think and we operate, we all kind of think we're mini gods, right? And we all kind of think and operate in that way. So we really getting in touch with that. We talked about that so much when something goes wrong and we think that we know the best. We know the best way that things should be or shouldn't be, or we kind of try to become controllers. Okay, so we'll move on to 217. If anybody wants to share anything, feel free. Ooh, Nild, please share with us.
Yeah, just on that idea that we're part of the whole. It seems then that the divine within us can nudge us and lead us, and that so that it's not coming necessarily totally from outside, but it's coming from within. I mean, that's just kind of the feeling I have. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's exactly what can happen if we allow it to. But if we veer off the road and we get pulled away by these small things and we get our consciousness involved in these small things, our back is kind of turned to God within and we can't hear him. And that happens. We get drawn by our senses. We get drawn by our attachments. That's why we really have to kind of work to minimize these things in our life, to minimize the voice, to quiet the external so that we can hear that internal. Because it's not just like, it's a decision, it's like designed that way. Katie, do you want to share?
Hi. Sorry, let me actually turn that off. I'm driving. Be less distracted. Sorry, this is kind of a simple point, but I was thinking about how you were talking about spending time on the body, and it made me immediately think like, oh, I spend a lot of time on my dealing with my emotions, but it's just such a great gift that the main solution to our emotional mayhem or whatever is our spiritual practices. I was like, well, really, when I try to work on my emotions, I'm more and more going just to my spiritual practice, and it's so helpful and seems like the main tool, as well as relying on trusted friends and devotees and conversations and support. And it made me realize that the people that I rely on, that I really trust and bring my full heart to, if they're not devotees, they certainly have some sort of spiritual basis, and anyway, I was just feeling really grateful for all that and very, very grateful for this whole conversation this morning. So thank you all, because I woke up and was doing my japa and I was just feeling super overwhelmed with some various bigger material life things. So anyway, sorry, it's a bit of a simple point, but I really just wanted to say thanks.
No, it's great. And that it's also very important to work on our emotions. I mean, spiritual bypassing is a real thing where we're just like, oh, I'm an enlightened being now and nothing else matters. And I'm just going to stuff down all of my problems and act like they're not a thing so that I can look and feel more enlightened. Like that's not real. Like we have to actually deal with these things. Like Corey was saying, like we have to actually pull them up and confront them and see what's going on. But we also have to be able to put them aside and to really engage our minds and our consciousness in these spiritual truths and in these spiritual practices so that we can keep the main thing. And that's really, it's like two-part. We have to keep working on ourselves and our material conditioning, and that will aid in our spiritual evolution as we're engaging ourselves also in these spiritual truths, and our perspective is broadening, like they're complementary to each other. Mariah?
Hi, yeah, I'm driving also. Hopefully y'all can hear me okay. I just wanted to add, and like I missed your name, but the man who just showed up, and as we engage more in these spiritual practices and put aside these small waves, that's when, we will receive that divine instruction from within, how to even better deal with the material. Like that's what's coming to me right now. So it's just like, it's not like, it's not like we're just spiritual bypassing. It's like we're putting it aside, realizing, okay, this is a temporary material thing that I'm going through. Let me turn my heart towards God and into my spiritual practice so that I can receive proper instruction how to deal with it, So yeah, I just wanted to reflect on it. Thank you.
That's so nice. Thanks. Yeah, to the degree that we're surrendered and we turn to God and we ask for that guidance, He will give it to us. And that's, I think a lot of us here can probably attest to that experience as well. Trevor.
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect a little as well. I really enjoy everything that was said. I always do. It never ceases to amaze me how everything goes hand in hand in such beautiful synchronicity. What stood out a lot for me was when Mariah was saying this isn't a void path, this is very personal, and it was very linked with what Nicole said about allowing yourself to have human emotions, because a lot of people, when they're taking this path of self-realization, they're like, why am I feeling this way? I'm better than that. I know better than that. And it's not about that, it's not a robotic thing at all. You're still experiencing emotions when you're in the space of observation, when you're the observer and you're on that transcendental platform. I really like how Maria brought that there are higher emotions to access. Once you get on that platform, you'll have access to a whole new world of happiness, and where it can't even be categorized the same way it's considered bliss, and it's like that's the dominant vibration you're holding in that space of observation. As you're experiencing all the other humanly emotions, you're able to still remain dominantly happy and have a high vibration as you're having traumas come out of your bodies, because it can be really confusing, it's like you can bust out in tears in the middle of doing your dishes, and it's like you're healing from a trauma you've completely forgot about just from the soul work that you're doing. So it's like I know it's not the dishes that are making me upset. It's just happening right now, you know what I mean? And it's like you could be doing something that makes you so happy, but having these lower vibrational emotions come out of you, and people are like, what's wrong with you? We're doing something awesome. It's like, I know, I can't help it right now. So
Yeah,
it's cool to be able to say, hey, look, I'm experiencing an emotion right now, but I'm still happy. So it gets confusing because you can be having a couple different emotions at once, but that dominant emotion in the background, once you're on that transcendental platform, is bliss. You can enjoy even both sides of the spectrum. And that's where Lisa was talking about walking on the emotional body of water. That was epic.
Mm.
And so I wanted to bring up an example of these higher vibrational emotions, as the gopis are very looked up to by all the devotees. They hold the most exalted post, the ladies that follow Krishna. And they would be so angry whenever Krishna would leave them. They would hallucinate and everything. They would they would be so engulfed in this anger emotion, but dominantly it was coming from love. It was because of how in love they were with Krishna. So that emotion is actually in the transcendental bliss category because of where the roots of it came from. You know what I mean? So it can be confusing, but
Yeah, so there is variegatedness in the spiritual world in their emotions, as there is very variegatedness in the material world. Though our emotions are much different than those.
right.
But we can use them to assist us in our spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's what I like about the Gita. It teaches you that it's okay to feel what you're feeling and go through what you're going through, but try to be creative and utilize it in a way that it's gonna
Serve
merge
us.
you even more into that transcendental platform and become even more conscious and whatnot. But
Yeah. And
I like to bring
I'll-
up that example because it even shows that people on the highest levels of devotion are still experiencing similar emotions, as above, so below. So it's not to beat yourself up about feeling angry or sad. Just know what it's trying to tell you, like you said earlier,
yeah, we definitely don't want to beat ourselves up.
and try to be creative and use it to progress and persevere.
Yeah. So I want to end with this story that happened to me, a conversation I was having with my guru, Radha Swami. And I was involved in some service, and the service was just really kind of it was really getting hard on me, the service that I was doing. And there's this story of this scorpion in the water, and a sage picks the scorpion up and brings him over to the other side of the shore so that he doesn't drown. And all the while the scorpion is biting the sage, but the sage just peacefully moves him over. And so as I'm talking to Radha Swami, I'm kind of telling him how difficult the service is. And he's like, so what question do you have for me? And I was like, well, you know how, and I was like, you know, the story where the sage picks up the scorpion and he moves him. I'm like, how do I not feel the bite like the sage does? How can I get it to the other side and not feel the bite? And he said, well, the sage felt the pain from the scorpion. He said, it's not that he didn't feel the scorpion biting him. He said, he just had broader realization. And he said, it's time for you to let the scorpion go. And I was like, yeah, why am I holding on to this so tightly when it's really obviously not a place that I need to be anymore? And that was like deeper inquiry into like my own attachments as to like, why am I holding on to this so heavily? You know, what am I making this mean about myself and my identity that I can't just let this go when I see that it's bringing my consciousness down? So, yeah, it's something for all of us to think about, the scorpions in our lives, and some we may need to let go, and others we can be resourceful, like Corey's talking about, and kind of figure out different ways of dealing with them. But whatever they are, we have to acknowledge their bites and the impact that it has on our lives, and what is in our realm, what's in our sphere of influence to do about it, and what's not, so that we can protect our most important asset, which is this consciousness, this soul, this driver of the vehicle, because that's what's eternal. That's what's going to get us to that's what's coming with us to our final destination, nothing else, right? So with that, does anyone have any last shares before we?
I would like to get in a thank you I look forward to Monday and Tuesday and Thursdays very much. Thank you everyone for all that you give on the calls, and Radha, you're amazing. Thank you everyone.
Thank you. I feel the same way. I look forward to them as well. I love hearing from you all and sharing in this experience. Corey, nice to have you back. I've been thinking about you actually the past couple days, wondering if you're going to come back. So I'm happy to see you.
Yeah, I missed Monday. It just wasn't my day. So I'm super happy to be back. And like I if I miss a day, I always watch the replay. So I'm super grateful that you do that. I can also relate to the fact that like I've been attached to scorpions that I should just let go. And in some level, that's the creative, like, you know, moving up to that transcendental level of like figuring out, wait a minute, I don't actually need to hang on to this scorpion. And I love that across like this whole discussion today, we've been touching on the fact that there's this material level and this transcendental level. And whenever we're looking at something, we have to ask ourselves, like, what level am I looking at? Like A Course in Miracles talks about level confusion. And I know that I suffer from a levels confusion. Like I'm in the material world and I think, oh, I'm doing a transcendental thing. And like, no, it's actually codependent.
Yeah.
It's like everything can kind of get just mixed up. And so sometimes when I get really confused, it's helpful to be like, okay, what level confusion am I having? What's transcendental? What's material? Like, let me like see if I can peel this apart just as a strategy. So I love that, like, we're taught, like, I don't usually get to talk to people about the transcendental versus material levels. So I love that we're having that conversation. So thank you so much, you guys.
Wow. Thank you. Great point. It can be very confusing. Sometimes we convince ourselves that we're doing it for this reason, but really we're not. Sometimes what helps me is like if I think in my mind, okay, how would I feel if this wasn't here anymore? If this was gone? And then we can really kind of figure out what our real intention is, because sometimes we're so much more attached from our ego, from our material ego than we know. And it can be confusing. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else before we go? You all were so insightful today. It was wonderful. I learned so much from you all.
Hi, Krishna, everyone. I'm just pulling up to my job, so I figured, okay, I better go ahead and say something if I want to now. I just wanted to share that, well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for your insightful.
Oh, I wonder if you're
for this platform. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think maybe you were switching your Wi-Fi or something, but
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I was just thanking everyone for their input and also you for this platform. Yeah, today was a really juicy mix that it made me reflect on is because we were talking about, you know, this is
Okay, you're going.
you know, Krishna is explaining, so like it's not something that
Oh, you're pausing a little bit. Your service seems to be going in and out a little bit.
Can anyone hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. Maybe give it one more
Okay,
try.
I just wanted to say, I was just saying that when you know, when it comes to healing, like I don't know, I was reflecting on the fact that healing, it doesn't always feel good. You know, a lot of people think, oh, I'm healed, and you know, you want to think of this healing process. Sometimes that healing is actually having to face that very thing that made you afraid or hurt you in the first place. And that purification, you know, just like if the body catches an infection or something, you know, the body fights it off with the fever. The fever doesn't feel good, you know, and you have to go through so much just to rid yourself of whatever that infection is. So that's even, you know, you can apply that to other places in life. So just speaking on these verses, it made me reflect on that, you know, like it's okay to still feel the pain or still feel some type of uncomfortability and know that it's getting me to that next stage. So I just wanted to share that short bit. Yeah. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for your
Thank
input.
you. Thank you so much. Yes, the pain is not always bad. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here and sharing today. What a wonderful class for us all. And I'll see you on Monday.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.